really weird in this one. Starting off at number 10 now, we have Galileo's finger. Galileo is one of the most famous scientists of all time and a key figure in the scientific revolution. He died in 1642. 95 years later, someone removed his middle finger and put it in a jar. Here it is. How gruesome does that look? This was seen as generally okay back then, and even as a way of respecting Galileo, who was quickly becoming an icon in the Western world. These days, tourists can find the finger in the Florence History of Science Museum, if you want to go see it tomorrow. Next up at number 9 now, we have Einstein's brain. People will often talk about how Einstein was one of the most intelligent people to ever live. Within hours of him dying, his brain was removed so that scientists could study it and perhaps discover insights into what made him such a genius. They were beginning to get somewhere. Some differences had been noticed, but then it went missing, presumed stolen. It was rediscovered in 1978 and is now held by the National Museum of Health and Medicine in Washington, D.C. Moving on to the number 8 spot now, we have Buddha's tooth, or Buddha. I know North Americans say Buddha, whatever, I say Buddha. The Buddha was probably one of the most famous people to ever live. His teachings and life inspired the major world religion of Buddhism. After he died in 483 BC, his body was cremated on a funeral pyre. The fire consumed everything except for a single canine tooth. It became a cherished relic over the next few thousand years. There was even a war fought over this tooth at one point. The preserved tooth now sits in a temple of the sacred tooth relic in Sri Lanka. It was named that after they put the tooth there, not before, obviously. At number 7 now, we have the pregnant mother. This isn't so much of a body part as it is two bodies, but I thought I'd put it on the list anyway. Gunther von Hagen is the man responsible for developing a preservation technique known as plastination, whereby the skin is peeled off a dead body and everything underneath is preserved by replacing the bodily fluids with a special plastic material. That's what he did for one of his most controversial works on the remains of this pregnant mother and her unborn fetus. He said his exhibitions have helped the public to understand the human body on a deeper level and to educate them as to what goes on below the skin. Other people have said it's sensationalist or even disrespectful. What do you guys think? Next up at number 6 now, we have Dan Sickles' leg. Major General Dan Sickles was a commander in the Union Army during the American Civil War. At the Battle of Gettysburg, he took a cannonball to the leg which just shattered the bone in two. He had his leg amputated later that day. He sent it to the Army Surgeon General for his display on body parts alongside the weapons that caused them. Major General Sickles' shattered leg made a fine but gruesome addition to the collection and is still on display to this day. Next up at number 5 now, we have the child's arm. This one comes from Frederick Ruysch, a Dutch artist in the 17th century who liked to display human bodies in a way that crossed both science and art. One of his most famous pieces included this, the preserved arm of a child connected with the dura mater above it. He mainly used alcohol to achieve preservation. Much of his work can now be found in Russian collections to this day. Coming in at number 4 now, we have the 9-foot colon. This one is not for the faint-hearted. It's a 9-foot long colon. I'm not kidding. It belonged to a 29-year-old man who died in 1882 from a condition known as Hirschsprung's disease. It made him very constipated. Sometimes he would actually go weeks without any bowel movements. He died on the toilet from extreme constipation, and scientists preserved his colon, which contained more than 40 pounds of feces at the time of his death. His colon was then filled with straw and put on display, where it measured to be over 9 feet long. Next up at number 3 now, we have Rasputin's penis. I'm not even sure if we're allowed to show you this one. This will be up to the editor, but you may now be looking at the blurry image, or not, of Grigory Rasputin's penis. He was a famous Russian mystic and advisor to Tsar Nicholas II. He was murdered in 1916 and supposedly castrated. There were rumors of his penis being lost and then found for a while. Some have claimed that this latest claim is just a sea cucumber or a horse's penis. The Russian museum where it's housed keeps it behind a special red curtain, and you have to hit a little button to pull the curtains back and reveal it. It's all very strange. Next up at number 2 now, we have Jeremy Bentham's head. When this English philosopher died in 1832, he left a request in his will that his body be preserved like this. Well, not his whole body, technically. His skeleton is there underneath the clothes and is filled out with straw, but his head was mummified using an ancient technique from native New Zealanders. The problem was, it didn't really go so well. His head ended up looking terrifying and not not very well preserved at all. So they replaced the head with a wax replica and kept the real one nearby. For a while, it was kept right in front on the ground like this. Somehow, this makes it at least twice as creepy. And finally, number 1 now, we have the murderer's head. This is the preserved head of Diogo Alves, a Portuguese serial killer and the last man to be hanged in that country. He was finally caught after he and his gang murdered over 70 poor people. After the hanging, some local scientists asked for his head so that they could study it. They believed that studying the shapes of people's skulls could lead you to understand how their brain worked, and they wanted to understand how this serial killer's mind was working. Modern science rejects this whole idea, but still, Diogo's head was handed down through the years and is still perfectly preserved to this day. Well guys, those were some creepy body parts that probably shouldn't be kicking around to this day. What do you think though? Gross? Interesting? A little bit of both? Let me know. I am Danny Burke. Thank you as always for watching guys, and I'll see you all in the next video.